Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1500 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I can for your education and entertainment. My opponent goes for a Sicilian Defense with c5, and if you are new to the channel, this move may surprise you, a3, known as the Mengarini Sicilian, but this is what I normally play. I initially learned this from a Gothamchess course about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago at this point, and it's really effective. I've got an entire playlist on my channel dedicated to my games in this opening. It's got to have at least 30 or 40 videos by now, which has been really cool with the growth of the channel, just being able to bump up my playlists so that people can search by opening. And my opponent plays g6, which I have faced many times in classical games, and what g6 does is it kind of prevents us from playing b4, which is the idea of the a3 Sicilian, because it says, well, no, because then we get bishop to g7 and your rook is under attack, and b4 doesn't make as much sense anymore because I'm going to develop with tempo against you. So we have to switch our plans a bit, and this is often considered to be a refutation of the Mengarini Sicilian. Like I said, I've faced this in over-the-board chess many times. I've actually had this exact sequence of moves against this Indian kid about 3 or 4 times in total. He plays at my old club. He's really good. He's like 9 years old, but he's, I don't know, maybe 2200 at this point in classical chess. And I have, I think every time I've played this system against him, I've gotten better positions, and I think I lost one of them because it was a rapid game, and I got way too low on time in a winning position, and he just fought his way out of it, which was really impressive. I think I might have a video of one of our games in classical chess on my channel, actually. But although the computer will say this is like minus 0.2, something like that, this sort of position I find incredibly easy to play with the white pieces. And one of the main ideas is basically f4, f5, to try to break open the king side and open up this bishop, right? So we'll continue with f4. And yeah, it's just a nice position. Now, what we need to ensure is that we do not play f5 too early. We need to build for f5. So we need to do something like knight f3, castle, to get the rook on the f-file, right? We often will drop this knight back to e2 and then to g3 to give more support for f5. Also play c3 to restrict the d4 square, which black clearly has incredibly good control over right now. We will most likely drop our bishop back to a2 as well, which partially is just a way to, and we'll do it right now. And whenever you see e6 in these systems, you just pretty much automatically drop the bishop back. Which one means that this knight can never chase it with a move like knight to a5, where otherwise it may be trapped, but because we have the a2 square, we can just drop back to a2, which justifies the move a3. But also the reason that we play bishop to a2 in response to e6 is because if black executes d5, then we do not want to trade these pawns. We want to have the option to meet d5 with e5 and grab some space on the dark squares, which will be very useful for attacking purposes. However, if our bishop is on c4 when d5 happens, then it can be very uncomfortable to deal with because it will come with tempo on our bishop, so we won't be able to play e5 because our bishop would be hanging, so we'd be forced to trade pawns, which we don't want to do. So my opponent goes knight g to e7. I think we should just continue with knight to f3. In some slightly different move orders, I would be playing the move h4 here to try to play h5. But because we've already committed to f4, I don't want to play it just yet. And my opponent goes d5. So like I said, our idea is to play e5 and grab these dark squares. We may have ideas of knight b5, knight d6, playing on the fact that the bishop doesn't control this diagonal because it's gone to g7. So a lot of the time you'll see a move like a6 in these positions, just stopping knight to b5, which does make sense in many cases. d4 is often a very risky move for black to play because it can be very good in terms of grabbing the e3 square, especially in conjunction with knight to f5 ideas. However, we will pretty much happily trade off our dark squared bishop for a knight landing on e3, so that's not really a problem. And also, d4 allows knight to e4, which gives us clear access to these f6 and d6 squares, which we control very well. So it's often a risky move. So we're going to castle, and what we might also do is play a move like knight to e2, and try to play c3, d4, and create this big dark squared pawn chain, essentially, which is really effective at trying to lock this bishop out of the game. Also, it can mitigate the effectiveness of f6 trying to break out, because if this e-pawn is supported by pawns on d4 and f4, then like after a trade, we can just take back with like the f-pawn, and the structure stays intact, and e6 becomes incredibly weak. But we don't have to worry about that just yet, I don't think. If f6 were to be played immediately, then we have options, and he does go for it. Taking is often very risky because we kind of lose control over the e5 square, and black can probably execute e5, which opens up his light squared bishop, and we just don't really want to allow that. So the move I'm leaning towards is queen to e2, just adding another layer of protection to e5. So if queen e2, take, then we maintain our e5 pawn. Now, of course, we have to be aware of knight to d4, kicking our queen, but our knight can take that knight, so that's not a problem. Now, after queen e2, queen c7, applying more pressure to e5, what do we do then? Well, I'm not a massive fan of putting my rook on e1, because if this trade occurs, I'd like to have a rook on the open f-file, ideally, but it's not the end of the world if I don't. Also, if queen e2, queen c7, we do have a move like knight to b5 with tempo on the queen, which could be very useful. And, I mean, there's many options there for black. He could play queen b8, just keeping the pressure. Maybe we can play knight to d6 in that situation. If queen c7, knight b5, queen b6 comes with tempo on the knight and lines up with the king, so that c4 might come with discovered check. There, maybe we still go knight to d6 and just allow c4 and move our king, and I mean, we get better control over d4 in that case, maybe. Or maybe we just meet it with d4. So there's a lot going on, but I think queen e2 is the principled approach. Rook e1 might be slightly better, but to me it feels like it makes sense to develop my queen, because my rook is already very active. Maybe queen e1 is also viable, as opposed to queen e2, because we get access to this dark square diagonal, which is often useful in this system when the f-pawn is pushed. You can put the queen on e1 to give it access to a square like g3, which can be useful for attacking purposes. However, I don't know. To me, I want to clear the back rank so my rook, so that this rook can come to e1 potentially. Like once I develop my dark squared bishop to like d2 maybe. My opponent takes. Okay. We of course can consider taking with the knight, but to me that makes no sense. If my opponent takes, then fantastic. Maybe. Actually, then rook takes, king takes. If queen takes, I hang this pawn. That looks a bit uncomfortable. So let's take with the f-pawn. And this e-pawn is a clear weakness in the black position. However, he does get knight to f5, which is a very active square. He might be trying to put a knight on d4, and after like knight takes, I mean, I can't really kick that knight out very well. So I'm considering the move knight to b5 to exert more control over d4 and prepare c3 to stop anything from coming there. If knight to b5, I don't have access to d6 though, because this knight controls it, which is annoying. Maybe the queen was better on e1 because it wouldn't get hit with knight d4. However, knight d4 would still come with an attack on c2, And if the queen was on e1, then c2 would be undefended. So my opponent's playing very well here. Very well. It's unclear where I should put this knight. If knight b5... Well, what if just a move like a6, actually? Yeah, how do I meet that? Because I can't really go there. g4 looks kind of tempting to try to kick the knight. But if, I mean, the knight could just go to d4. Yeah, that's... Because my queen can't maintain control of c2 and d5 at the same time if she has to move away from e2. So, this is very tricky. Very, very tricky. What if I don't do anything? Let's say I played king h1. What happens? Well, I assume knight to d4. Knight d4, knight d4. And yeah, I'm just a bit buggered because this is under attack, this is under attack, and this is under attack. That's not going to work, is it? So maybe maybe bishop f4 is the way to go. Just defending. Now I know I'm lining up with the rook, which is uncomfortable, but I'm also connecting my rooks, and if I get hit with a move like knight d4, I can always move my queen to d2, and e5 is still protected by the bishop. So let's say bishop f4, knight d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, queen to d2. Everything should be under control. So I think that's what I'm going to go for. So tricky position, but you know, this is chess. Chess is pretty much about problem solving. That's a very big part of it. As I said, I'm very aware that this rook is lined up with my bishop, but yeah, this is okay. We can go ahead and take, I think. And now the bishop is defended. So that's not a problem. We'll go queen to d2, I believe. Well, yeah, I've got to keep a hold of c2. And I mean, queen f2 makes no sense because it would be pinning my bishop to my queen. So yeah, my opponent does get this knight on d4, but I don't think it's the end of the world. We're ready to play rook a to e1 to give this pawn even more support. We're also ready to play a move like knight to e2 to challenge this knight and prepare the move c3, d4. When we move this rook as well, and move our knight and play c3, d4, we also give the option of rerouting this bishop to this diagonal, because obviously it's quite stunted over here for the time being. So very interesting stuff. Bishop d7, okay. It's not a particularly good bishop, is it? This e6 pawn is a big liability. So I'm really starting to like our position. Really starting to like it now that we've navigated that tricky portion. Of course, the first thing you should look at is, can I sacrifice and pick up 3 pawns for the piece? You could, but I don't think there's enough compensation. Just rook b8 and b2 falls, and that looks no good. So I really like the look of knight to e2, challenging the knight immediately. I want it gone. It's annoying. If a move like queen b6, lending extra support to the knight, c3 looks pretty good. Just forcing the knight to make a decision. If the knight trades, fine. If the knight goes to f5, also fine. I could play g4 if I really want to, but more importantly, I want to play d4, which gives this pawn absolute support. It can never be challenged again very well, because there's no f or d pawns that can attack it anymore. And also blocks off this diagonal, which is useful. So yeah, it's kind of working out now. We're starting to execute on some of our longer term plans, particularly with the f6 trade, the pawn going to f6 and then trading on e5. This e6 pawn is a very long-term weakness. Every endgame with equal material should be favourable to us because of that. Okay, queen h4. Okay, I mean, our bishop is defended like a billion times. Oh, well, okay, no. I suppose if c3 take, then our bishop does hang because of this. So, yeah, that isn't actually quite simple. Quite so simple. I suppose we can just play bishop g3, though. hitting the queen, offering a trade, preparing to take the knight. Maybe my opponent wants to go queen g4 to maintain defense of the knight. But I think I'm just going to go c3. Oh no, because then our knight hangs. Okay, that's an interesting move. What if I take the knight? I don't want to, but what if I do? Like, take, bishop to g3. What, rook f1, queen g4? I don't love it, because I want to play c3, d4. So what if I instead go g3, so that the queen doesn't see the knight? Well, if g3 still queen g4, and my knight is under pressure, I suppose I could play a move like rook a to e1, which maybe I want to play anyway, and then I'm still preparing c3. Again, if c3 straight away, then I'm just losing a piece. Interesting move. Interesting move. I assume the queen does want to go to g4. I guess that's the whole point. I think I like g3, though. What about bishop e3? Oh, well, no, then I'm just hanging this pawn and it comes with mate threats. No. Let's just go g3. I'm not concerned about queen h3. My king is perfectly safe. We've got so many pieces over on the king side. If queen g4, I suppose knight to f3 is an idea, which I didn't realize. So queen g4, how do I deal with that? So I can't play c3 because knight to f3 and I'd have to give up the rook. So queen g4, what if I take? What if I take? Well, I mean, I can just play a move like queen f2. Attacking, and I mean, how do you defend? Okay, queen h3, yeah, that's not concerning. The queen isn't really doing anything. Yeah, she's kind of useless. Applying pressure to the rook? Yeah, but, I mean, it doesn't do anything. c3 looks pretty good to me. I suppose maybe you could argue that g5 is an idea to try and make my bishop move and play knight, like something like g5, take knight to f3, and then I'd have to give up my rook because it's forking my king and my queen, which makes sense, but he doesn't have time. If c3, g5, take, something like, I don't know, knight takes with tempo on the queen, queen g4, rook e1, I'm just up, what, like a pawn? Something like that. That looks good to me, I think. So yeah, I think c3 is what I want to do, and I want this trade on e2. I think knight to f5 is what my opponent will play to keep the pieces on the board. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, apologies for the infrequent uploads over the past few days. I've just been busy, quite simply, so I just haven't been able to. But apologies about that. Hopefully there would have been plenty of my older videos for you guys to watch due to lack of new uploads. And I mean, I've got loads of them, so there's got to be some that you haven't seen yet. If I ever do, if I ever am in a position where I can't upload on a certain day. So apologies, but yeah. Anyway, long term, like I said, our e5 pawn should be a major asset because it restricts the black position and it makes this e-pawn very weak because it's a backwards pawn. We just have more space in general. This bishop absolutely sucks. So, yeah. There isn't... I suppose there's something to be said for knight e2 and bishop h6. It's an interesting concept, right? Not sure if it's any good, though. I mean, let's say I do trade, which I wouldn't necessarily do, but let's say I do, and just play d4. Or maybe rook a to e1, preparing d4 so my bishop can come back to b1 without blocking the rook. I don't really see what that does. Yeah, he does take. I'm expecting bishop h6, to be honest. The e-pawn is incredibly well defended. This bishop still kind of sucks. Maybe bishop to b5 is an interesting move. stopping me from playing d4, of course. That would be an interesting idea. No, he tries to double up. Okay, well, I'm really not concerned about that at all. Can d4 be met with a6, preparing bishop to b5 with a skewer? I don't think so. I think I can just play something like queen g2, potentially offering a queen trade. Yeah, I think so. Or even if here, bishop b1, just preparing to meet bishop b5 with bishop d3. Maybe. Should I maybe start with rook a to e1? Let's say my opponent doubles up, which I assume is his plan. Then I mean d4. a6. Maybe he's trying to execute g5 still. But if d4 happens, it just doesn't work, because if all the trades happen on f1 and my bishop gets deflected, the e5 pawn will still be defended by my d pawn. So, yeah, interesting. I'm going to go rook a to e1. I mean, maybe rook f2 to play rook a to f1 was better to facilitate trades on the f-file, but whenever I move my dark-squared bishop, I will be offering mass trades on the f-file anyway. And like I said, endgames should favor me because of the pawn structure. It should be very beneficial because of this really isolated, well, not isolated, but backwards e-pawn. I don't see a reason not to play d4. Because, see, if I play a move like bishop b1, then g5 can be played, with the idea of bishop takes, rook f1, rook f1, rook f1, queen f1, queen f1, king f1, and bishop to e5, because my bishop gets deflected from the defense, right? So I think g5 is definitely an option right now. So I should probably play d4 now to ensure that this is supported. If c4, then he's just locking his own bishop out of the game, because this is the only real viable diagonal it can come to. And my bishop can come to b1 and get on this diagonal, where, you know, it's not going to be amazing necessarily, but it'll be better than this bishop, probably. I mean, maybe bishop a4 stops bishop c2. Okay, no, he trades. Yeah, that makes sense. So take. My bishop can come to a square like d3, probably. So, like, you know, a6, bishop b1, bishop b5, bishop d3. That's fine. I arguably have a weak d-pawn. Yeah, it is a little bit weak. However, this is also weak. I also have ideas of bishop takes d5 and like e takes d5 and e6 with forks. Also an option. Although, you know, it would hang the d-pawn for the time being. Okay, h6. Interesting. So does he just want to trade all the pieces then? I'm assuming he wants to force g5 and trade on f1. Okay. Well, I think I'll just let him. That's fine by me. And I think I'll just use my spare time to get the bishop on this open diagonal, which he has, by the way, just weakened by removing defense of g6. So we're encouraging him to play g5. Yeah, but I think this is good for me. I think. If all the pieces get traded, it's definitely good for me. Because e5 is secured, right? I'm getting my dark-squared bishop to the open diagonal. Now, what he might do is trade all the rooks, but keep his queen on the board. That would seem like a smarter idea to me. Although, by playing g5, he has massively weakened his king. So can he keep the queens on the board? I don't know. Tough to say. I think it's his best try. I think trading queens is a death sentence. Like, he might be able to hold the endgame. Yeah, but it's just so much better for me. Okay, he gets the bishop to the diagonal first, sure. But It's not good still. I mean, king f2 looks like it makes the most sense. Okay. Maybe he's going to try and play b5. Which makes sense, but... how do we want to do this? a4 is interesting. I could also go something like this. But, I mean, b5 just locks the bishop in. And do I really want to do this? I don't think so. We could go bishop g6. And, I don't know, bishop f8. I feel like I should start with bishop b4. Just to get on this diagonal. Because I think a trade of dark-squared bishops should favour us. Because all of our pawns are on dark squares. So if we're left with just light squared bishops, then we're the only one who can really do anything, because black's got so many light squared pawns. A king and pawn endgame, I'm not sure if anybody can win that, but... I'm tempted to go bishop g6. And if, like, bishop f8... Take. King e3, king g7... I can get in behind. Maybe that's useful. I don't know. Maybe I should just start with king e3, because it can't be a bad move, right? Maybe h4 is a good idea. Bishop to b3. What does that do? Can I just come here? I don't understand what that move does. Maybe it's just a waiting move. Maybe he's trying to discourage b4 because he can get in behind. But I'm not going to play that. I don't know. Bishop g6. Bishop e8 looks pretty strong. But I suppose if I come to d7, there's always this. And if here... That's actually a problem. If I get to c8, that's a problem for black. So I'm going to go bishop g6. Like I said, the trade of dark squared bishops with bishop f8 might be necessary for black to get his king out, which he does do. However, most of black's pawns are on light squares, which are going to be vulnerable. Also, can't I just walk in on the dark squares here? Which looks very risky for black. I think this is winning. And this goes all the way back to the early... Oh, that's a very scary idea. But I'm not going to fall for it. I just want to bring my king in on the dark squares. That's all I want to do. And the whole problem with black's position, from my perspective, is our e5 pawn. I think that's the big problem for black. Because... Oh, that's a good move. b4, b6... Wait, no, I have b3. And king b2 wins the bishop. So probably a4 has to be played to free the bishop. But if a4, I'll of course nab the free pawn and then gain access to b4. Always be aware of tactics, ladies and gents. What I was saying is that us having a pawn on e5 and my opponent with this backwards pawn on e6 is just a major liability. Not just from a perspective of having not enough space. Okay, I don't know why he's just giving me a free bishop. He should have gone a4. But it's... you know, it's meant that all these endgames are going to be good for us because e6 is just so weak. But yeah, this is very confusing because the point is my bishop controls b1. That's the big idea. So yeah, I'm really confused. a4 was of course the way to go to try and break the bishop out, but now I just have a bishop for a pawn, which is obviously completely winning because there are so many pawns left on the board. And I mean, the game technically isn't over just yet. I'll play g4 to freeze these pawns in place. But yeah, I'm not really sure what my opponent's plan here is. Because he just can't defend this. Now, I think it would be a bit of a mistake to play a move like a4, which I was looking at initially. Because black goes b4, and my king has no way in. And this b-pawn is a constant problem. So, yeah, just bishop d3. This pawn can't be defended. We'll pick it up. Our king can walk in. We can just push the a-pawn and win by doing that. Or by going after these pawns. So, let's trade. That's fine. We'll bring our king. We are up a full bishop now. h5 can be met with h3. And eventually we're just going to put black into zugzwang, where he either has to move his h-pawn and give us a free pawn, or he has to move his king away from the defense of e6. So he resigns. Very interesting game. That was very, well, kind of uneventful, to be honest. It was a very positional game. So I think for those of you who want to learn more about positional chess, this was hopefully a really, really useful video for you. And I might title it something along those lines, I don't know. But yeah, let's jump into the analysis and see what the computer has to say. Okay, so 92.2% accuracy for us, 85.2% for our opponent. Looks like black had a bit of an advantage some point in the middle game, and then we turned it around, particularly for the endgame. And although the endgame might have been a draw, technically, it was definitely very hard for black to play, which is why I allowed the endgame. But let's jump into it. So e4, c5, and a3. As I said, g6 is one of the most common moves, because it's generally considered a refutation. But is it? We continue with knight c3 and go for this kind of Vienna-like setup. So if you watch my channel, you know that I play the Vienna against a lot of different openings. Because you can adapt it to most openings, and it's just very enjoyable. And it's viable. So knight c6, d3, and we're preparing f4 ideas. d6, which is just a good move, you know, getting control of the light square, the dark squares, opening up the light square bishop. f4, computer prefers bishop a2, but, you know, it's f4 is fine. e6, and I always like to meet e6 with bishop to a2, because the idea is, let's say I left my bishop here, and something like knight g to e7 and castles, then d5 could be a bit of a problem, because it comes with tempo on the bishop, so I can't play e5 because my bishop hangs. So if I play the best computer move, which is bishop to b3, black has the option of taking on e4, which in this case isn't the best move. The computer likes the fact that we keep our pawns together. But, you know, let's say we were to take, for example, that would be pretty bad. This is really not good. Our f-pawn gets isolated because it loses its partner. And, you know, these dark squares are very, very well controlled by black. So bishop a2 gets rid of any of those problems in the future. We have knight g to e7. And here I was considering the move h4, which the computer likes, trying to go h5, of course, because the knight is not on f6, where on f6 it would be stopping h5, but it's on e7. However, my opponent can just play h5. And the computer still kind of likes this position. It thinks we can get the knight to g5, but I just went knight to f3, which is the best move. d5, and I go e5. Computer prefers to leave the tension. It likes just castling, and thinks that after something like take, castles, we have a decent position. But I don't really want a queen trade, so I went e5, which is the more ambitious approach. My opponent castles, we go castles, and f6, which, funnily enough, taking is the best move. Why? So knight e2, knight f5. Ah, right. So what the computer wants is it wants to play d4 as quickly as possible. And why can't black play e5? Because this is what I was concerned about. There's knight to e4, and you can't defend d5 properly. And if you go knight e7, knight d5 anyway. Ah, right. And then, so you can't take with the queen because the knight hangs. So if king takes, then queen f3. And if knight to f6 blocking, bishop h6 forces the king into the center. And yeah, we just hunt the king down. So basically, the idea is that if black can't play e5 and plays like bishop g7, then I guess we get to play d4 at some point. I mean, not yet. But what? Knight g3, let's say take. e5. Yeah, I suppose d5 is always a big issue. So let's say king h8. Rook e1. And we're just clamping down on e5. And if we can get d4 in as well, then you're never playing d5. Sorry, e5. So that's very interesting. I played queen e2. It's like the second best move. So fe5, fe5, knight f5, and bishop f4. Computer prefers bishop g5, which I did consider. I thought that it was bad because of queen b6 with dual ideas, but the engine just says g4 has to be played, and if the knight comes to here, then we're better. Knight take, rook f1, let's say rook f1, knight d4, queen f2, queen c7, defending this, and then there's just no threats. Interesting. I went bishop f4, just defending the e5 pawn. I was very happy to see this, so I can trade. And queen d2 is the best move, so everything is kept under control. Bishop d7 is not the best. Queen b6 is better. Here, I think I was planning to just play rook a b1, which seems to be the best move. And here we're all right. Knight e2, queen e2, c4, bishop e3. Rook f1, king f1, cd3, queen d3, queen's under attack, and here we just lose the e5 pawn. So why can't we take like this? Rook f8, king g1. Queen a6 is the only move. Point being that it stops d4 because the queen hangs, but we can still... Can we still just defend though? What's wrong with this? Oh, okay. And if rook d1, then queen a4 is the only move to go for the advantage. And if we drop the bishop back, then bishop h6. Yeah, these are a bunch of only moves for black to maintain an advantage, which realistically, a lot of them look very strange. So bishop d7. And black is slightly better. But we go knight e2, which is the best move. Queen h4 confused me. I thought knight f5 was going to be played. Engine doesn't like that. It thinks we can go bishop g5, queen c7, g4, knight d4, knight d4, let's say cd4, and then bishop f6. Okay, I did not see this. Cool, very cool, though. And I mean, g5, and our bishop is just locked in there. That's tough. So queen h4, though, which I thought was an interesting move, because I was initially wanting to play bishop g3. But this is losing because of knight e2, queen e2, and queen d4. Which I actually didn't see, to be honest. I didn't see queen d4. I thought my opponent was going to go queen g4, which is still much better for black. And if I take, then just queen d4. I went g3. The best move was knight d4. And then rook a to e1. The problem was, I thought that now we can't play c3. But I guess we can. Let's say rook to f5. Bishop here. Let's say queen g4, rook f5, queen f5, queen b4. Yeah, we do actually have good play. And e5 is very well defended. My issue was that I thought my bishop just sucked. But I suppose it does play a role by coming to b3 and defending c2. But g3, queen h3, I was not concerned about whatsoever. I thought queen g4 was better. The engine disagrees. It thinks we can play take-take in king g2. Okay. But this would lead to interesting things where this is our only move. Right? Because otherwise, if we played a second best move, then g5. That's the whole point. And you are effectively, if I move my bishop, then you're going to play knight f3, and I'm going to lose. Or you're going to take here and then win the knight. But queen h3, c3, knight e2, queen e2, rook f7. I thought a6 was better. Engine agrees, because then if we go d4, then, you know, just bishop b5 ideas. So rook f7, rook a to e1. Engine prefers bishop e3, which I can't actually explain why this is good, because this doesn't look that good to me. Oh, well, I suppose we're getting d4, and this is very weak, and we have the f file. Okay, no, that makes sense. Rook a to e1, though. Rook a to f8, d4, cd4, cd4. Black is slightly better, but a6 has to be played. Here, I was considering bishop b1, but that apparently loses. Oh, wait, what? Why is this losing? Oh, wow. It pins the g-pawn. Ah. h6 was not the way to go, though. Bishop b1, g5. I understand the purpose, but trading everything helped me. I thought that the way to fight might be queen g4, but the issue is I go queen d3, which is what I was preparing. And your only way to, like, try and play is to trade the queens. And, I mean, this is so weak. Like, here, h4. Engine loves this for white. So, everything comes off the board. And this should be a draw. But it's always going to be a two-result game, really, where either the game is drawn or white wins. Black never wins this, really, because this is just so weak. And we have more space. So bishop c4. Bishop b4 is the best move, taking away bishop f8. The engine still wants bishop f8, though, and wants black to hold this, which is, again, should be a draw. But with these pawns on light squares, and they're stuck on light squares, only I can win. Because black can't target any of my pawns, because they're all on dark squares, and his bishop's on a light square. So a6 was very confusing. King e3 is good. Bishop b3 is not good. The engine wants bishop f8 quickly. Bishop g6 is good. My opponent trades. And again, the engine says this is a draw, but you have to prove it. I decide to come over this way to try and march into the dark squares. The engine says to ignore it and just play b6. And then, you know, you create like a force field. My king can't pass. Which makes sense, yeah. But it looks scary. So bishop a2 was very strange. King c3. And a5 is the game-losing move. Here you have to go bishop c4. And after king b4, you really have to go b6 to stop my king getting in. Even here, I mean, we have potential ways to win this. The engine just wants to come back, but obviously that's not ambitious in the slightest. Maybe we can try a4, but here there's a5 with check, which is the problem. So, yeah, I guess this isn't on the cards. The king, if it comes here, then maybe we have chances to win. But still, very difficult. But a5 is just, no. b3 is the move. And here, a4 was definitely the only try to give the bishop a way out. And here, I was just going to, let's say bishop c4, just march the king in on the dark squares. And we're up a pawn. We'll put it on a5, restrict this pawn. Let's say b6, a5, take. We have a passed pawn. We can bring the king over. b5, I mean, just gives us a free bishop. And then it's pretty elementary. It's very easy to win this. And we put my opponent in Zugzwang, and he resigns. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Bit of a different, like, style of game, I suppose. But I hope it was useful and enjoyable for you all. If you want to see another game in the A3 Sicilian, which is this, then check out the video up here to learn more. And if you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun, check out the playlist down there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.